I'm Emily.
And I'm Hannah.
We are best friends and dietitians. We have a goal of challenging nutrition misinformation and fitness trends with an evidence-based approach.
Each episode, we will dish up our thoughts about the latest facts on a popular health-related topic.
We're the Up-Beet Dietitians.
Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Up-Beet Dietitians podcast. We wanted to let you know we're taking a quick 4-week break before we go into season 6. We are going to be revisiting for the next 4 weeks past favorite episodes that you guys have seemed to like a lot. So if you haven't listened to them yet, now's your chance. If you have listened to them, it's always good to revisit. It may have been a while. They are going to be some throwbacks. So hopefully that can be a good way to spark your memory. And then we'll be back with a brand new episode for season 6 on April 5th.
In the meantime, besides listening to these episodes, we highly recommend going back and listening to old episodes that you might not have gotten around to. Additionally, make sure to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And then we're getting back into the blogging game. So be sure to check out the upbeatdietitians.com where we'll be posting all new blogs throughout. And we'll see you back in April. Enjoy.
See you in April. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Up-Beet Dietitians podcast. Today we are joined by Lauren Link, who Emily and I worked under at Purdue. She is a registered dietitian and board certified specialist in sports dietetics. I'm leaving that in just to make everyone laugh. She is the director of sports nutrition at Purdue University, where Emily and I went to school. And when Lauren was there as a student, she played women's soccer and was part of the 2007 Big Ten Tournament Championship team. As an undergrad, she completed a dual degree in Dietetics and Nutrition, Fitness and Health, and later completed her master's from Purdue in Health and Kinesiology.
Lauren began her professional career as a clinical dietitian with St. Vincent's Hospital before returning to her alma mater in 2014 as the program's first full-time sports dietitian. As the director of sports nutrition at Purdue, she oversees all sports nutrition operations and staff and works directly with football, men's basketball, soccer, and volleyball. Outside of her work at Purdue, she also sits on the board of directors for the Collegiate and Professional Sports Dietitians Association and is currently the vice president. In 2017, she published her first book, The Healthy Former Athlete. We're so excited to share this episode with you, and we hope you enjoy.
Enjoy. Lauren, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's
so good to see you guys again.
Yes, you too. We are so excited to have you on. So today we want to go into something Lauren always talks about on social media called marketing madness, and we'll get into where you come up with that idea, what it is, and all of that in a second. But we like to first have our guests walk us through like a day in the life, what you're doing for work, education, hobbies, all that fun stuff. So give it to us, if you will.
All right. So, a day in the life of a sports dietitian is a little bit crazy, and no day is really the same. So I am currently the assistant athletics director for sports nutrition at Purdue University. And I oversee our staff of sports dietitians, which is about to be 5 of us total. And our jobs entail lots of different things, basically anything pertaining to nutrition for our athletes. We're kind of leading that charge. So lots of one-on-one counseling, and that can be about lots of stuff. Some of it is performance related, like hydration or fueling. Some of it is medical nutrition therapy. We have athletes with diabetes, we have athletes with GI issues, with food allergies, you name it. So lots of medical nutrition therapy. We would meet with our athletes about body composition. We have a DEXA machine. I don't know how many listeners are dietetics folks. So maybe people don't care about what a DEXA is. But anyway, we do lots of food service. So we have fueling stations, which are kind of like snack bars on crack or something. Dining hall for our athletes. We do menu planning. We travel with the athletes. We're on the sideline at games, we're at practices, depending on what team it is and how in-depth our support might be, just depending on the needs of that sport. Some are a little needier than others. So all that to say, any day in the life is just going to be some combination mismatch of those things. So it's a lot of fun. and it takes a lot of hours for sure. So we work a lot of hours, but I feel like I have pretty good work-life balance and time for hobbies. I mean, you mentioned like hobbies and things. I have a 11-month-old daughter who's pretty freaking cute. And so I like spend time with her. My husband and I like to travel. We like craft beer and food. I feel like kind of your standard foodie stuff. So I don't know if that hit everything, but that's my nutshell answer.
I think you definitely knocked them all out very well. But yeah, Hannah and I actually worked under Lauren for a little bit. So we had the pleasure of watching your chaotic life as you went by.
And seeing the
day.
snack bars on crack.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And you guys were an integral part of making those function.
Oh.
Our students are the best. We could not do it without our students.
Cool. So let's give the audience, though, kind of why they're here today. And I feel like you are I feel like there's the social media term like CEO of, I would call you the CEO of Marketing Madness and breaking down nutrition misinformation around like all those flashy food labels and whatnot. So kind of walk our listeners through what exactly is Marketing Madness. And then what was your inspiration behind it? Kind of what, I don't even know. Hannah and I have followed you online for so long, but I don't know if either of us were really aware of your first Marketing Madness post. So kind of walk us through that entire process.
Sure. So for one, I'm totally taking the CEO title and running with that. The first time I used Marketing Madness, it was not in any attempt to make it like my big thing. I was kind of just stuck on like, I didn't have a lot of great ideas for content. And I was walking through the grocery store, and I'm pretty positive in saying my first ever one was like a bougie Lunchable. I can't even remember what brand it is. But I just remember like looking at it and thinking like, really, like that looks kind of like a normal Lunchable, but it was, you know, like matte cardboard and very natural looking, and it had words like natural and I don't know what else was on there, but I remember thinking like, okay, eye roll, that's ridiculous, you know, like that's ridiculous. And then I picked it up in the store, and I looked at that compared to a normal Lunchable, and they were like basically the same. And it just struck me of like, oh my gosh, there's so many moms probably walking around the store paying, you know, 150%, 200% more for this bougie looking Lunchable and thinking that like, oh wow, I'm so healthy and my kid's getting this premium product, and really it's the same, and it's all marketing. So that was kind of my unplanned like launch into Marketing Madness. And at first, again, I didn't really think it would be like a whole big thing, but I, you know, then was trying to kind of look, but so now my eyes are peeled a little bit of like, okay, what else is out there? And then I found like, oh my God, it's literally everything. Like every stupid thing in the store is wildly marketed, and there's no regulation around it either, which we know as dietitians. And I include a little bit about that piece of stuff in my book. So I had done a little bit of work with that in the past, and it just like all kind of came back to light for me. I was just like, oh my gosh, like all these words mean nothing, but that's why people are buying them, and they're paying more for nothing else, or certainly not anything notable. So yeah, so that's how it started. And I think you asked me to say what it is, which we've probably kind of alluded to, but essentially just calling out companies and or products for using misleading marketing, whether it's words, whether it's claims. And you know, there are rules around what you can claim a product does or doesn't do, but outside of a few rules, there are not many. So there's nothing regulating terms like all natural and oh gosh, even some things like cage free and you know, whatever. I'm doing a terrible job thinking of examples. Farm raised, mom approved, doctor approved. No regulations around that. But people notice that stuff. So anyway, it's my attempt at trying to bring some light to those topics and just point out how similar a lot of those things are to their kind of peasant counterpart. and or just how full of shit they are.
And to clarify, this is like mostly food products too, like supplements are a whole other ball game where there's even less regulation. So if you can imagine foods have this much like confusion around them, imagine supplements being their own other like wild, wild west. But yeah, anyway, Emily and I always joke about how like the most seemingly silly things we post about are often the ones that like get the most views and attention and take us into the CEO status of said topic. Like right now, I'd say on TikTok, I'm like the CEO of watermelon. It's like my thing right now for like the dumbest reason, like the most dumb video I put the least amount of work into went viral. And now it's like all I'm talking about. So it's just so funny how social media works. But thank you for sharing all that. Sure. I always love hearing like the becomings of how you became the CEO of Marketing Madness. So I think we've touched on this, but any other thoughts on like the big negative impacts of all this misleading marketing on our groceries and or supplements, but mostly groceries, as we're kind of talking about food mostly today?
Yeah. So I do want to like acknowledge what you said about supplements. Like, oh my gosh, that could be a whole like thing in itself. And if food is sketchy, like and food's not that sketchy inherently, but marketing around it is. But yeah, supplements are like times 1,000. But food specifically, I would say some of it's like pretty harmless. You could argue like what's the big deal? Because it is still food. So at least unlike supplements, we're not concerned that it maybe has scary ingredients in it or that there's not enough of a efficacious dose or something like that. But I think the harm is a couple of things. One, especially right now while food is freaking expensive. I mean, food insecurity is real, as we all know, and dietitians, I think, especially know that in the work that we do. But the fact that people are paying more for a largely similar product is kind of messed up, And if you're paying for that, you can probably afford it. But I think probably people spend some money on products that they don't really need to, under this guise that it's better. Especially, I think I mentioned like moms and their kids. I think that's like an especially kind of messed up scenario. Now, as a mom myself, there's just like so much mom guilt and stress around those kinds of choices. And often I just want to like tell all the moms, like, you're doing fine and your child is fine, and he or she does not need the XYZ special, fancy, expensive brand when you can't afford it necessarily. So I think that's one thing. It's messed up to be spending more money on these things that you don't necessarily need, or that it's not doing what it says it's doing for you. And then the other piece, I think, is just kind of like building off that stress. Again, we know because we see clients and patients every day, stress around food is enormous for so many kind of pretty ridiculous reasons. And so the last thing we need is more stress, more anxiety, more second guessing. And actually too, I mean, like nutritionally, I can't necessarily think of an example off the top of my head, but definitely it's influencing our nutrition choices, not just from a cost standpoint, but it's influencing maybe how much of a nutrient we're getting. And that could be negative in some sense. Again, I could think of an example if I took long enough, but off the top of my head, I can't think of an exact, but for sure there's choices being made every day because of marketing, because of those flashy colors or words or whatever you're seeing, or the person they're using advertising it, that are impacting what choices you're making for better or for worse. And I think a lot of it's for worse.
Yeah. I feel like food is just such a constant conversation everywhere you go, whether it's like a social event or a family gathering or whatnot. And then there's so much stigma around it, and like also so much comparison with like, how do you eat and like whatnot. I was having a conversation with a couple coworkers the other day, and they were like ranting about the added sugar component in like yogurt or something, and how the food industry is brainwashing us. And I was like, we've got bigger issues here in the world where like it's not that big of a deal. It's okay, but was crazy to me, kind of like just even a professional setting, or it's like a healthcare professional setting, things like this were happening. And I'm like, then you go into the grocery store and there's just so much there. And for anyone who like has just like bare minimum education around nutrition, it can be so overwhelming, and you could be like very easily influenced because they don't know that like terms aren't regulated on labels.
Absolutely.
And you kind of see what someone's advertising on social media, or you see what other people are doing, and you're like, should I be like guilty about what I'm choosing? This one seems healthier, but it's more expensive. That's out of my budget. It just, there's so much that goes into it. I feel like that stress component is huge. So many people feel stressed so much about food that it's not great.
And I think like an example that's coming to mind to me, for listeners, we've said a few different things, but one instance is that food companies love buzzwords. And so there's so many examples right now of, plant-based, and anything that they can, they slap plant-based on, which we know there's a lot of gray area around what plant-based exactly means. But so they love putting plant-based on like things that are literally a plant. So like, yes, it is plant-based because it's a plant, or like, okay, rice. Oh, your rice is plant-based. Oh, fantastic. Like every rice is plant-based. Non-GMO, slapping non-GMO on things that can't be genetically modified. The example I remember specifically was salt. And salt is a mineral. It is, it's not a living organism. It cannot be genetically modified. And that's just one, but like they do that all the time. They slap these labels on so people gravitate towards that and they choose those. And like, there's nothing different about that product. It's not better. It's not superior. But they don't know that.
Have you guys seen the TikTok or the reel? It's Food Science Babe, who, shout out to her. She's amazing.
Oh, love her.
She's amazing. What does she say? She's like, there aren't any O's to M GMOs, like there aren't any organisms to modify. I just thought of that. But yeah, GMOs is a big one. Emily and I always talk about that one. It's just so silly. I saw a TikTok yesterday, 2 days ago, whatever. Going back to the whole price point thing. It was all about gut health, because gut health is the big thing right now. We got to support our gut and have a happy gut. And these gut health experts, which is not a real title, are telling us what foods to eat. And she was giving alternatives. They were like the heavy air quotes, if you're listening, not watching, heavy air quotes on the good versus bad, like Coke. So it was like Coke versus the Olipop. It was Ritz crackers versus like some other cracker that had no seed oils in it. And then a dietitian stitched it and was like, oh, shocker, every alternative that she suggests is like way more expensive, which is almost always the case. And likely your gut health is going to be fine if you do enjoy Ritz crackers and Coke here and there. Like it's gonna be okay.
Right.
So we've talked about labels and kind of how many of them are out there and how there's not really a lot of regulation around them, but what kind of tips do you have for our listeners if they do want to shop smarter and might not be like fooled as easily by the marketing madness out there, and kind of how can they navigate, I guess, like labels, or like looking at labels, interpreting them from like a food standpoint? We also knocked supplements on there, but like I feel like that's a whole nother question as well. So we'll start with food. How can they kind of navigate that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there are a handful of labels that are regulated by the FDA. Not very many compared to the labels that are out there total. So I guess I would say like it depends on your nutrition goals, of course. And so ideally you're working with a dietitian who could chime in on this too, but I know that that's not necessarily realistic or accessible for everybody. But let's say you were trying to eat a little bit lower calorie or lower fat or something like that. Those sorts of labels, if it says low calorie, if it says low fat, or no fat, like those are accurate. Like those are labels that you have to meet a certain criteria to use those labels on your product. I'm not saying that everybody should go look for low calorie or low fat things, but if that matched your nutrition goals, that could be something you could trust, I suppose, is what I mean there. And then past that, I guess a few tips I give people, one would just be to look past a lot of those words, for one, not the ones I just gave the example, but some that we said earlier, right? Like natural and science proven, or like I said, mom approved, doctor approved. There's probably not even a comprehensive list out there, but I would just recommend look past some of those words. Look past the colors and the packaging and things like that. And another thing you can trust is the nutrition facts label. So, that is regulated by the FDA. So if you're looking for something that has protein, I would encourage you to just flip it over and look at the protein, because that's another really good example actually that I haven't mentioned, is things love slapping protein on them, and absurd foods. I've definitely used a couple examples, like protein peanut butter or protein cream cheese. Most of the time, those products have a little bit more protein than their counterpart. Protein peanut butter has 8 grams instead of 6 or 7, like the normal one. And so is that worth the extra $3? No, it's not. So I would say if you have nutrition goals and you're label savvy enough to kind of be looking for some of those things, look at the nutrition facts label, do the math, look at the serving size, and figure out is that realistic? Could I get a good amount of protein from that? And go with that, whether it's carbs that you're looking for, whole grains that you're looking for, protein, like I said, maybe you're looking to do a little bit less added sugar. And I hate to, demonize sugar, because love me some sugar. And I tell my athletes, we need carbs. We all need carbs. And sugar are part of those carbs. But it's a fair goal that, maybe you are trying to limit some added sugar in your diet. If that's a goal of yours, you can look at that. That's on the nutrition label. So those are just some examples of things you can trust and look for, and maybe that matches your goal. And I would honestly just ignore a lot of the rest. Don't look at the packaging, don't look at those words. Like I said, the colors. I would just be really skeptical of those sorts of buzzwords, claims, etc. on the front of a package. And I tell people all the time, there's a few examples. I think we all probably have our handful of name brands that we buy, because I don't know, we've been brainwashed into thinking they taste different. But for the vast majority of products, the store brand is the same. In fact, in many cases, it's the exact same if you look at the ingredients and the label. So if budget is something that you're considering, a lot of people are, consider that, pick, maybe you splurge on those couple of things that you think taste different, and the rest of the things, go with the store brand, go with the cheaper brand, go with the bulk. I'm a big bulk fan. And I don't have any visual way to show it on here, but that's another thing you can look for at the store. On the price tag, you can actually find on the bottom left or right corner, usually it'll say price per unit or price per ounce or something like that. And you can compare and pick the cheaper one. So I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but I'm just trying to kind of visualize if I was going through the store. Those are some things I would look for versus disregard in terms of labeling around food.
I think that's great advice. It definitely depends on the person and what their goals are, first of all. And then it's not helpful to completely disregard nutrition and the label and what's on there, but a lot of it doesn't matter. And so it's just knowing what actually matters. So like you said, if your goals are to limit added sugar, that's going to be on there. You can find objectively how much added sugar is in that product. But if it says on the front of the label, maybe keto, doesn't automatically mean it's going to be the best thing ever for you.
For sure. And I guess too, I would add maybe one last consideration is, do you like it? Because so many people buy crap they don't like, or that they're not even really going to eat, but they buy it because they feel like they should, or they get enticed by that marketing. And what a waste, you should buy food you like and that you're actually going to eat. What, if not, what's the point? So that should be a consideration too.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. Well, one final question on this whole marketing madness topic. I think I have a post of yours in my mind that might be one of my favorites, but in your opinion, what is the most outrageous hashtag marketing madness product that you have reviewed to date, if you had to pick one?
I get asked this here and there, and it's hard because they're all so stupid.
Yes.
But in my mind, I have two that come to mind. And I'll be interested if it's the one that you have. But one is the fast bar. So this is a granola bar that you eat to stay fasting. And so like literally the entire premise goes against its purpose, because you cannot stay fasting if you eat food. Not that you should be fasting in the first place. That's a whole other thing. You don't need to be fasting. But if you are, you certainly can't eat a granola bar. And it has it had a very balanced macronutrient profile. Like it had some carbs, protein, and fat. I'm unsure what about this would possibly make somebody think that they're fasting. I think I said in the post, like, unless you open it and it like puts you to sleep and you sleep for a few hours and that's why you stay fasting. I can't imagine what else about the package would keep you fasting. So that's one. And then the other, because you said keto, it's in my brain, a keto mayo, which made me LOL in the store when I saw it, because if anyone's unaware, mayo is keto inherently, because it is pretty much 100% fat, which falls right in line with a keto recommendation. And again, you don't need to be in keto either. But if you are, you could use any mayo. You wouldn't have to buy keto mayo. So those are a couple examples that come to mind for me, but they're also dumb.
They're also dumb. I was going to say keto mayo. That's what I was thinking of. I forgot about the fasted bar thing. That's hilarious.
So we always like ending our episodes with kind of, if you had to provide any final thoughts on all things marketing madness and leave our listeners with some final thoughts, exactly that. And we always joke that like they would only listen to this portion of the episode. What would you want them to take away from all of this?
I think I would say, I kind of feel like I'm tempted to say what I just said a few minutes ago, which was like, ultimately you should buy food that you like and that you'll eat and that is nourishing. And I know that can be easier said than done with all the misinformation that we all process daily. But I think, yeah, maybe it goes back to like, we've all seen the like memes or whatever floating around that are essentially saying the anxiety and stress caused by all the food misinformation out there is far worse for your body than any one or two or three or four foods could ever be. It's just like so true. Stress is so bad for your body in so many ways. So to stress about food in this way, it's just so silly. So yeah, I just would encourage people to choose food based on like what you need, what meets your budget, and what will nourish you in like a really literal sense, and maybe too like an emotional sense here and there as well. So I know that's not like building off that's kind of building off what I already said, but I think that's like my big drive home point if I could.
I think that's great. I can see the Canva graphic already.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Well, let's get into the final part of the episode, our bonus question. So we like to always end the episode with a fun little debate. And today we're bringing it back to your sports RD roots, Lauren. So our bonus question today is, and we let you go first as the guest, what is the best sports drinks flavor? And maybe a part two to this I didn't add in the draft is, what is like the best sports drink like brands like Gatorade, Powerade, all that?
Yep. So I mean, I'm a Gatorade girl through and through, so that's for sure my go-to brand. And I'm probably gonna say Riptide Rush. Wow. It's the light purple, but I have to throw in an asterisk that lemon lime, like the OG lemon lime, is pretty real as well. And actually, when I was pregnant, I did not have really like many cravings, like crazy cravings. But I did have a solid probably like week and a half where I drank an absurd amount of lemon lime Gatorade, and it just like happened naturally. I was at work, and of course we're surrounded by Gatorade at work, and I had worked out, and I like never get Gatorade after I work out. I'm like, you know, a pretty casual exerciser these days, so unless it's like really hot or something, I don't usually grab Gatorade. But I did. I like fill up my cup like a little bit with lemon lime Gatorade, and I was like, oh my God, that's delicious. And then I like fill up again, like a little bit and a little bit more. And this is a big cup. And so then I filled it all the way up. It was like for sure, like 20 to 32 ounces. So in that hour after I finished, I drank like 64 ounces of lemon lime Gatorade. It was like I was chugging it. I was just like, oh my God, this is so good. And then it lasted for like a week. Like I went home and I was like, told my husband, like, you have to go get me some lemon lime Gatorade. And then I don't know, like after a week, it was kind of just over. And since then I haven't drank that much, but I feel like that like ties down to my roots. Like somewhere deep down, obviously, I love me some lemon lime.
That is an amazing stereotypical sports RD pregnancy craving.
So true.
That's awesome. Well, I was going to say lemon lime too. I think that just deserves so much love. It's an amazing flavor. Like there's a reason why that's been like around probably since the very beginning of Gatorades.
It's so refreshing.
Days. Yeah.
You know?
And that's what you want when you're an athlete who like is needing hydration is refreshment.
Exactly.
They couldn't have gotten better from there. Okay,
What's
Emily.
yours, Emily?
My favorite is, I don't know the name, but it's the light blue flavor.
Ooh.
I feel like it
I
might
think
be
Glacier
blue.
Freeze.
Oh, yes.
Oh, that sounds right. Yeah. I associate that with like being sick.
That's a positive memory for you.
I don't know. Every time I was like, oh yeah, Gatorade. And it was always that one. Hannah, I'm surprised you had one answer.
I know. I don't think I'm very
have.
passionate about Gatorade. I like it a lot, but if I'm passionate, that's when I have multiple answers and I can't choose. But this one I was okay having one firm decision. Also, I wanted to be like Lauren, so.
I get that.
Cool. So, Lauren, if people want to hear more from you and they also want to learn and stay up to date on the marketing madness world, where can they find you? Like any social medias? You can really promote whatever you'd like at this point. So where can they find you?
You can find me, my handle is at Link to Nutrition. I'm mostly on Instagram and Twitter. I dabble on Facebook for like my mom mostly. So I'm on that, Link to Nutrition. And I also have a book, The Healthy Former Athlete, if there's any former athletes listening who are struggling with transitioning into what I call normal humanhood. You could check that book out. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, I think all have it online. So, but Amazon, I think, is kind of the main hub. And it's also a ebook. So if that's interesting to anybody struggling with that transition, you could check that out too.
Well, we will be sure to share all the links to all those things below so you guys can find them. Lauren, thank you so much for coming on today. This is going to be a great episode. We've not really discussed label reading much at all, so this will be a really good one. But again, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this episode. We will see you next week.
Bye, guys.
Right. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in on this episode of the Up-Beet Dietitians with your hosts, Emily Krause and Hannah Thompson.
We appreciate you all so much for continuing to support us. In order to support us and sustain the success of this podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review.
If you'd like to provide us feedback for future episodes and guest stars, follow us on Instagram at the Up-Beet Dietitians.
Lastly, you can show us support by providing a monthly donation using the link at the end of our bio.
Once again, thank you so much for listening today, and stay tuned next Wednesday for a new episode. Until then, we hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.